flashing red and blue lights of the sheriff's patrol cars were a shocking, violent intrusion, a pulsating violation of the midnight quiet of our new home. They slashed through the profound darkness of the surrounding woods, painting the trunks of the ancient oak trees in frantic alternating strokes of crimson and cobalt. On my front porch, which smelled of night-blooming jasmine and old rain-washed wood, stood two young deputies. Their faces were grim and illuminated by the chaos, their hands resting near their holstered weapons. Their youth and nervousness, a stark contrast to the authority they were trying to project. Behind them, standing on my lawn with a look of supreme, righteous vindication, was our neighbor, Carol Peterson. "These are the people I told you about. Officers," she announced, her voice ringing with the triumphant finality of a battle she was convinced she had just won. "They're the ones causing the disturbance, refusing to follow the rules that the rest of us live by. An illegal fire, loud music, it's a constant problem, a menace." I stood in the doorway of our old farmhouse, my heart hammering against my ribs, a profound sense of disbelief warring with a surge of white-hot anger. We had moved here for peace. We had moved here to escape, to build a sanctuary. And now, thanks to the petty tyrant next door, that sanctuary was being treated like a crime scene, bathed in the accusatory lights of a law enforcement response. She had summoned on a whim beside me. My wife, Sarah, simply sighed. It was not a sigh of fear or surrender, but of a deep, bone-deep weariness. The sigh of a woman who had just finished a brutal 70-hour work week only to come home to find a fresh, new, and utterly stupid crisis waiting for her on her own doorstep. She pulled her worn, comfortable flannel robe tighter around herself, her expression unreadable in the strobing, disorienting lights. This whole absurd drama was the culmination of a 6-month campaign of escalating aggression, a one-sided war, waged by Carol, the president of the Willow Creek Bluffs Homeowners Association, against the one house she could not control, ours. It all began with Sarah's election. My wife, Sarah Grayson, was the newly elected sheriff of Clarion County. She had run a grueling 18-month campaign on an anti-corruption platform, taking on a powerful, entrenched political machine that had run this county for decades. Her victory was a stunning upset, a triumph for the people, but in doing so she had made some very powerful and very bitter enemies. Our old house, a lovely colonial in the center of the county seat, suddenly felt exposed, our privacy a thing of the past. We were a target, so after the election, we made a decision. Found a small, beautiful, and critically private piece of property on the far edge of the county. It was an old renovated farmhouse on 5 acres of rolling woods, a pre-existing parcel that was completely surrounded by, but legally exempt from, the new Willow Creek Bluffs development. We had done our due diligence. Our lawyer had confirmed its ironclad legal status. Our land was a sovereign island, not subject to their rules, their dues, or their president. It was meant to be our escape, a place where she could shed the immense weight of her badge, the constant threat assessments, and just be Sarah. It was a place where I, a novelist who worked from home, could have the quiet I needed to write. We had made a pact. At home, she was not the sheriff. We wouldn't advertise it. We just wanted to be left alone. Carol, however, a woman whose entire identity seemed to be wrapped up in her title as HOA president, could not abide by this. Her world was one of absolute compliance, of meticulously enforced conformity. The existence of a 5-acre property in the heart of her kingdom that refused to bend the knee was a personal affront to her authority. Her campaign to bring us into the fold had started politely enough, the tactic of cloying sweetness. A week after we moved in, she arrived at our door with a welcome basket filled with cheap wine, stale crackers, and nestled amongst the cellophane grass, an application to join the HOA and a bill for the first month's dues. I had been the one to answer the door. "Thank you for the basket, Carol," I'd said politely, "but as I'm sure you know from the property records, our parcel isn't actually part of the association." Her smile had tightened, the warmth instantly vanishing. "All residents who enjoy the beauty and security of the Bluffs are part of the association. Mr. Grayson, it's what makes our community so harmonious and keeps our property values so high."
Ow.
"We're not residents of the Bluffs," ID replied, still polite but firm. "We're residents of 114 Old Creek Road. We appreciate the offer, but we'll have to decline." Her polite facade had crumbled, and from that day on, we were not neighbors. We were dissidents. The violation notices began to appear in our mailbox. Flimsy paper threats for infractions she had no authority to enforce. We were fined for the color of our mailbox, a rustic dark green that was apparently not on the approved palette of beige, taupe, or grege. We were fined for the small, neat vegetable garden Sarah had planted behind the house, unapproved agricultural activity that can attract vermin. We were even sent a formal warning that the American flag I flew from our porch was a violation because the flagpole was not of the officially sanctioned white Fender brand fiberglass variety. We had ignored it all on the advice of a county. Lawyer Sarah knew. "She has no jurisdiction," he'd said with a laugh. "Her letters are legally meaningless. They have the legal weight of a grocery list. Just throw them in the trash." But to a person like Carol, being ignored is worse than being fought. Her obsession grew. She would stand at the edge of her perfectly manicured lawn staring at our property, her face a mask of simmering resentment, which brought us to tonight. It had been a brutal week for Sarah. A multi-day manhunt for an armed fugitive had ended in a shootout, leaving one of her deputies wounded. She was exhausted, emotionally raw and haunted. She had come home tonight wanting nothing more than to unwind, to feel the solid ground of her own home beneath her feet. So I had built a small, safe fire in the stone-lined fire pit in our backyard. A pit that was 100 feet from the nearest structure and in full compliance with all county fire codes. Sarah was sitting in an old Adirondack chair, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. A glass of wine in her hand, the soft, melancholic sounds of a classical guitar playlist drifting from a small Bluetooth speaker. It was a picture of perfect, hard-earned peace. At 10:30 p.m., that peace was shattered. Carol had come marching to the edge of our property line, a massive military-grade flashlight in her hand, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Turn that fire off immediately," she had shrieked, her voice cutting through the quiet night. "You are in violation of the 10 p.m. quiet hours and the community-wide ban on open flames. You are endangering this entire community." Sarah, without getting up from her chair, had looked over at her, her face illuminated by the gentle, dancing firelight. "Carol," she had said, her voice weary but firm, "I am on my own property. I am following all county safety ordinances. Please go back inside your house and leave us in peace." For Carol, this was the final, unforgivable act of defiance. To be dismissed so calmly, so completely, by the very people she had been trying to bring to heel. It was a challenge she could not tolerate. She had pulled out her phone, her thumb, jabbing at the screen. "I am not asking again. I am calling 911. We'll see what the sheriff's deputies have to say about this." And now, here they were. Two young deputies, clearly fresh out of the academy, standing on our porch, caught between a hysterical, ruled quoting, HOA president and a calm, but clearly not intimidated couple in their bathrobes. The senior of the two deputies, a kid who looked all of 25 and whose name tag read Evans, cleared his throat. "Sir, ma'am," he began, his voice trying for a tone of practiced authority. "We've received a report of an illegal burn, excessive noise, and a potential public nuisance. I'm going to have to ask you to extinguish the fire and come with us to answer some questions." This was it. The moment of truth. I started to argue, to explain the legal status of our land, the history, the deed. But Sarah put a calm hand on my arm, silencing me. She had had enough. Her sanctuary had been breached, her peace shattered. The sheriff of Clarion County was done being harassed. She was about to go on duty. Sarah took a slow, deliberate step forward, moving from the shadows of the doorway into the full, harsh glare of the porch light. The two young deputies, puffed up with the borrowed authority of their uniforms and the urgency of a 911 call, looked at her expectantly. They were anticipating a tearful apology, a heated argument, perhaps some drunken pleading. They got none of it. What they got was a sudden, chilling transformation. The tired, unassuming woman in the flannel robe vanished. In her place stood someone else entirely, a person whose posture straightened by a subtle, almost imperceptible inch, whose gaze became sharp and analytical, and whose very presence seemed to suck the ambient noise out of the night. She was no longer Sarah, my wife. She was Sheriff Grayson, and she was assessing a tactical situation. "What are your names and badge numbers, deputies?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it cut through the night with an authority so absolute, so innate, that both young men flinched as if she had shouted. It was a tone that did not invite conversation. It commanded a response. They stared at her, their mouths slightly agape, their entire train of thought completely derailed. It was the senior deputy Evans who finally found his voice, his academy training kicking in. "I'm Deputy Evans, ma'am, badge 712. This is Deputy Colt, badge 719. Now, as I was saying, we need you to cooperate, and we need your watch commander tonight?" Sarah interrupted, her voice still quiet, her eyes never leaving theirs. The question was not a request. It was an interrogation, and they were failing it. "Sergeant Miller is the watch commander." "Ma'am," Deputy Colt stammered, clearly rattled by this unexpected and deeply confusing turn of events. Carol, standing on the lawn behind them, let out an impatient scoff, sensing her power over the scene slipping away. "What does any of this matter? Just arrest them. They're breaking the rules. Look at that fire." Sarah ignored her completely, as if she were a yapping dog. She focused her full, undivided attention on the two deputies who were now standing ramrod straight. "Okay, Evans and Colt," she said, the informal use of their last names, both a subtle assertion of dominance and a way of speaking to them as a fellow officer. "Here's what's going to happen. You are going to go back to your vehicle. You are going to get Sergeant Miller. On the radio, you are going to inform him that you are at 114 Old Creek Road, which is the private residence of the county sheriff. You are going to tell him that Ms. Carol Peterson," she gestured dismissively toward the woman on the lawn, "has filed a false 911 report for a non-existent public nuisance, and that she is now knowingly interfering with a peace officer. Even if I am technically off duty, then you are going to wait for his specific instructions. Do you understand me?" The color drained from the faces of both deputies in the strobing colored lights. Their eyes widened in horrified comprehension. They had just tried to intimidate, question, and potentially arrest their own boss. Not just their boss, but the highest-ranking duly elected law enforcement officer in the entire county. They were staring at the woman who signed their paychecks. The woman who had the power to end their careers before they had even truly begun? Sheriff Grayson? Deputy Evans whispered, his voice cracking, a look of pure, unadulterated terror on his young face. "Oh my God. Ma'am, we are so sorry. We had no idea. The call just came in as—" "I know what the call came in as. Deputy Sarah," said her voice a little softer now, a hint of the weary boss rather than the cold commander. "Now follow my instructions." They practically fell over each other, scrambling back to their patrol car, their movements clumsy with panic and mortification. Carol, who had overheard this stunning exchange, stood frozen on the lawn, her face a mask of utter disbelief. This was not how her triumphant moment was supposed to play out. "She's not the sheriff," she yelled, her voice a shrill, desperate shriek. "She's lying. She's trying to intimidate you. I'm the president of the HOA. Don't listen to her." The proof came a moment later, not from a badge, but from the speaker of the patrol car's radio. A different voice, a deep, gravelly baritone filled with the fury of a suddenly awakened and very angry sergeant, came booming out of the car's PA speaker, a sound so loud it echoed through the entire silent neighborhood, waking up lights. "In houses up and down the street, all units at 114 Old Creek stand down. I repeat, stand down. Evans, Colt, confirm visual on the sheriff. Good. Now apologize to her again and await her instructions. Ma'am. If you are the complainant, Miss Peterson, you are to remain exactly where you are. You are being officially detained for investigation of a violation of penal Code 148.5 filing a false police report. The public, authoritative confirmation of her identity, broadcast for all of her sleeping, rule-abiding neighbors to hear, was the final, devastating blow. Carol let out a small, strangled whimper and visibly crumpled, her righteous indignation collapsing into a puddle of pure, horrified shame. The two deputies, their faces pale as sheets, walked back toward the porch, their posture now one of profound deference. Sheriff Deputy Evans began, his voice trembling slightly. "Sergeant Miller is on his way, and, on behalf of both of us, please accept our most profound apologies for the intrusion and our unprofessional conduct." Sarah simply nodded, her expression grim. The time for being off duty was over. The weary sigh of a boss who had to clean up a mess on her one night off, she walked down the porch steps, past the two terrified deputies, and toward a now openly weeping Carol. She didn't yell. She didn't lecture. She just stood before her, the sheriff of Clarion County in a flannel robe and slippers, and explained the law. She explained the seriousness of misusing the 911 system and the specific legal penalties for filing a false police report. She explained the legal definition of harassment. And she explained in quiet, final terms that a full and detailed report of this incident would be filed with the district attorney's office, and that they would decide whether or not to press criminal charges. She used her authority not for petty revenge, but to finally and permanently end the campaign of harassment that had plagued us for months. After a long, quiet conversation, the deputies, under Sarah's instruction, escorted a sobbing and completely broken Carol back to her home. Sergeant Miller arrived a few minutes later, his face a mask of apology, and after a brief, professional conversation with his boss, he and his deputies were gone. The flashing lights vanished, and the profound, peaceful silence of the woods descended. Once more, the small fire in the pit was still crackling, casting a warm, gentle glow on the porch. Sarah walked back up the steps and collapsed into the Adirondack chair beside me, the sheriff mask on, her face just looking tired. I put my arm around her. "So much for a quiet night off," I said softly. She leaned her head on my shoulder, looking into the fire. "It's okay," she whispered. "I don't think we'll be hearing from the HOA again." Our secret was out now, a fact we would have to deal with. But so was the truth of her authority, and the quiet of our reclaimed sanctuary that felt like a fair trade. The peace we had sought had finally been secured, not by asking, but by a quiet, reluctant, and utterly decisive show of force.